what are some of the things that Joe Public should be looking at once they've got, like, even if they go with a buyer's agent, what are some of the things they should be thinking about, or at least knowing is good to be looking at? Like, what are these data points that we should be?
Yeah, so I got to do a tangent on that one. That was a bit of free education, but I guess check out those people that I mentioned if you want to go ahead and do it yourself. There's a lot of great information there, and at a low cost too. But generally, from the location perspective, you're looking at, to find those locations, you're looking at things like days on market. You're looking at, like, basically the supply and demand levels as the overarching principle of it. And then also going further into, well, what's the future plan for this type of location? So by that, I mean, you're looking at what the future development potential is for that whole local government area, what the infrastructure spend is going to be, and why there is prospective growth going to go through that location. And as an example, there is a inland rail that's been approved in Australia. Some people know this, some people don't. That's connecting basically Queensland down to Melbourne. And there's a lot of those regional towns that are on the outskirts of that are going to be great beneficiaries of all that infrastructure spend and connection for people throughout Australia. Places like Albury-Wodonga, Toowoomba, as an example, they're on those near those stations, and that's going to help with all, like, say, logistics and also people travelling. So things like that are really important.
Okay, you just did people a massive favour. You just dropped 2 locations.
Ooh.
This is what people are coming here for on this pod.
Well, the secret sauce for me is, like,
and guys, by the time this comes out, it might be a different area.
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah. They generally change every sort of like 3 months or so, 3 to 6 months, and like, say, Toowoomba, for example, that's come off like a really low growth period over the past 10 years. So generally, locations, if they've done nothing, it's kind of like investing in the share market, right? If you're into those, like looking at the charts, if it's done nothing for a long period of time, there is, like, well, what's the chances of it doing something in the future? And that's when you look into that data point and you can see.
Okay, so there's these different resources that you mentioned before, and you mentioned a bunch of things like your government area, population, days on market, all that sort of stuff. Like, what's the nitty gritty for somebody who's like, all right, 15,000 locations, 15,000 suburbs. You've mentioned 2. How did you get to those 2?
Okay.
What's the data that you saw that we should be looking at to find those? Like, it's How do you just go from 15,000 locations to, like, maybe 10?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you start narrowing it down. So this is where the data point, you're going to have to go in your back pocket, spend a little bit of money to get the data, which is fine. But the key areas that I like to look at are days on market, so having below 60.
Okay, below 60? Cool, yeah.
60.
Below 60 days.
Yeah.
Why below 60 days?
Because it's showing that there's a reasonable amount of demand. Properties that are taking longer than 2 months to sell, it's just an indication that there's not a lot of demand in that area, and that's there's this. I mean, you can go more risk averse and try and find locations that have done nothing. And for me, you're kind of taking a punt if you're going over that. And to each their own, right? I'd rather invest for the long term and have good confidence. So that's why I say 60.
Makes sense as well. If something's over 60. I guess I'm thinking about comparables, which may actually be a bit different. So once you find all those, so you narrow down to the suburbs that have an average of below 60 days on market, and then you narrow it down further, right?
Yes, that's one of many. So
that's one of many.
The key
what's the next one that's going to narrow us down?
Well, that's getting into like the buy demand levels. So you can see, like, I aim for average to high buy demand levels, because that's obviously showing future growth prospects because people are flooding into that area.
And how do we know what average to high looks like in terms of an actual number?
So that's coming into the days on market, and then the inventory levels. So inventory levels are basically how long are the properties that are on the market going to take to sell. So for me, I've got like a bar of, I want to try and make sure that if all the properties that are on the market today, if there was no more added, they would be sucked up within 3 months.
Okay.
So that's the goal for me. And any above that, then you're going into, it's just like you're going high days on market and things like that. So the demand level is not as high.
Okay.
Like you got to put a line in the sand somewhere, and for me, that's where my comfort level is.
Okay. Average to high inventory level.
Yeah. So inventory level 3 or below.
Yep.
Below 3 is probably the real target. So below 3 months to basically suck up all the inventory that's in that suburb. And another key area that I look for locations is population. So
Ooh, yes,
50,000 people is my absolute minimum.
50,000 people in that location. And how in how big of an area?
So that's the local government area. So
local government area. So, all right. So that's like basically the Shire.
Yeah. So say Toowoomba at the moment, that's 125,000 plus.
And why no minimum of 50,000? Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. And once it comes up,
is that because of the demand?
Well, just
like
it's
be hard to sell and stuff if you need to, or
diversity of employment. So if you've got too little people, then population growth compounds, right? So
it's not going to grow as fast.
It's not going to grow as fast, but also for me, those locations that are under 50,000, you're going into too regional, and in the event of a pullback in the market, which often occurs, it's generally, every 10 to 18 years you have a deep pullback. Like you look at in 2008 we had the GFC, right? And then in 2000 we had the dot-com bubble, and then we had the 90s recession. You keep going back through time, and there's multiple
pullbacks.
Multiple pullbacks that last, say, 2 to 4 years. So that's how I invest, because I'm more risk averse, and I'm not going for the home run where you go and invest in. Gladstone at the moment is on a few people's lists, but Gladstone, in 2007, people were flooding in there because they were getting 12% yields. And
because of the
mining boom, correct. So, and then
same thing happened in WA.
Yep, exactly. So, those places, obviously, it's been 15 years now. So, there's a lot of fear around those locations because of what happened. However, they've also gentrified, they've changed, population has gone up. So, and that kind of leads me to say, 50,000 people, you've at least got a number of different employment hubs. So it's not just a mining town or a farming town, so to speak. So that's the metric there.